The courtroom was filled with murmurs, but everything went quiet the moment the door creaked open. A small figure barely 5 feet tall stood at the threshold. The people inside the room looked at her. She was just a child. A little girl, 6 years old, with messy brown hair, wearing a faded dress too big for her tiny frame. Her shoes squeaked as she walked forward, her small hands trembling as they reached for the wooden bench. But there was a spark in her eyes, something the people in the room hadn't expected to see from someone so young. "Judge, lady," the girl's voice rang out clear and steady, cutting through the tension in the room. Every eye was on her, waiting. Her words shocked them all. "If you free my mom, I will make your legs work again." A wave of laughter erupted in the courtroom. It was absurd, wasn't it? A little girl, standing in front of the judge, promising to heal her legs with the magic she claimed to have. But it wasn't the laughter that caught Judge Harper's attention. It was the girl's eyes, green, full of hope, and so sincere. For a moment the room went still. People whispered, their voices filled with disbelief. Was she serious? How could a child, so small, possibly think she could heal a paralyzed woman who'd been that way for years? Judge Harper, a woman who had been confined to a wheelchair for 3 long years, stared at the girl. It wasn't the first time she'd heard of desperate people. But this little girl? There was something different in her words, something that made Harper's heart tighten. She had to know what was going on. "Why do you think you can do that?" Harper asked, her voice trembling slightly but calm. The girl looked up, her gaze unwavering. "Because I can. If you let my mom go, I'll help you. I promise." The room exploded into chaos again. Some shouted, others scoffed, but there was one voice that carried through the noise. Harper's own thoughts. Could this child really do it? The courtroom doors slammed shut as the judge turned her chair to face the young girl, her hands tightening around the armrests. She needed to know how this little girl could believe something like that. There had to be more to the story. To understand how this moment came to be, we need to go back. The story starts far from this courtroom, in a small, cramped apartment in the heart of the city. Meet Maria, a mother of 3 juggling 3 jobs to keep food on the table. She was no stranger to hardship. But the pain of losing her husband to a drunk driver had been the hardest blow. He had been wealthy, well-known, but his death had gone unpunished. The drunk driver? Untouched by the law. And Maria, left to pick up the pieces alone, had no choice but to fight on. Her kids were her world. Her oldest daughter, Mia, was a high schooler doing her best to help with the younger ones. Then there was Ben, her son, who was 10, and finally little Lily, the youngest, only 6. Lily had always been a special child. Not because she was particularly smart or talented, but because she seemed to feel things others couldn't. One evening, after Maria returned from her 3rd shift as a waitress, she found Lily struggling to breathe in her bed, gasping for air as her small chest heaved painfully. Lily had been suffering from severe asthma for years, and Maria had been doing everything she could to keep the disease under control. But that night it seemed different. The medication was running low, and Maria didn't have enough money for another prescription. She was at her breaking point. Maria had tried everything, called her boss for an upfront payment, begged him, pleaded with him, but he refused. The bills were piling up and Lily's condition was getting worse. Maria had no choice but to make a decision that could change everything. She stood in front of the bank later that night, shaking with fear. The thought of robbing a bank, a mother, seemed impossible. But what other option did she have? Lily's life was at risk and she would do anything to save her. With trembling hands, Maria walked into the bank. What would she do next? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below and leave a like if you love this video. Maria's mind raced as she stood at the front of the bank, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined being in this situation. A mother, desperate to save her child's life, standing in front of a vault filled with money. How had it come to this? She had thought about other options, borrow from friends maybe. But the money she needed was too much for anyone to help with. The medicine that would save Lily's life cost hundreds of dollars. And she didn't have it. What else can I do? Maria thought, pacing in front of the bank. It was dark outside, the cold night air biting at her skin, but her fear felt hotter than the summer sun. It was too late to turn back now. Her hands were shaking as she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the old gun she'd borrowed from a friend. It was rusty and used, but it was all she had. She walked into the bank, trying to keep her breath steady, keeping her head low as she approached the counter. The bank was busy, but there were only a few customers, just enough to hide behind as she made her way toward the back office. The sound of the bell ringing as she entered felt deafening. "Good evening, miss. How can I help you?" one of the tellers asked, oblivious to the storm brewing just steps away. Maria's grip tightened on the gun as her stomach twisted with guilt. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She didn't even want to be here, but she had no choice. For Lily. I have to do this. The teller smiled, his back turned, and that's when Maria struck. She rushed forward, her voice shaking as she forced the gun onto the counter. Give me all the cash. Now. The teller froze, staring at her, his smile fading into confusion. But Maria didn't give him a chance to speak. Please, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Please just do it. I need it for my daughter. The teller's face turned pale as the reality of the situation hit him. He took a step back, then reached for the alarm button under the counter. Maria's heart dropped, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. The sound of sirens wailed outside. Too late. The cold metal of the gun was heavy in Maria's hand as she watched the teller's fingers hover near the alarm. Her heart raced, her mind spinning with terror and guilt. The sirens outside were already starting to wail, growing louder by the second. No, no, no. This isn't supposed to happen like this, she thought, a knot tightening in her stomach. She had never imagined that it would go this far. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling as she lowered the gun. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just need the money. My daughter is sick, she's dying, and I can't watch her suffer anymore. Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt the tears threatening to spill over. She wiped them away quickly, but the shame stung worse than anything else. The teller looked at her, his face a mixture of fear and confusion. He didn't know what to do. No one ever thought they would be caught in a robbery like this. He was just a kid, barely older than Mia, Maria's oldest daughter. I don't have much, he said, his voice shaky. Please don't hurt me. I'll get you the cash, okay? Maria's hands were shaking, the gun still pressed against the counter. She nodded numbly, her heart hammering in her chest. She needed to stay calm to think this through. Lily's life was on the line. Behind the teller, Maria could see the vault door. That's where the real money was, the money she needed to buy the medicine that would save her daughter. But how could she get back there? The guards were on high alert now, and the clock was ticking. The teller fumbled with the drawer, pulling out bundles of cash and shoving them toward her. He avoided eye contact, as though he couldn't bear to look at the woman who was about to destroy his life. Maria's hand trembled as she took the money from him, but as she did, she noticed something, a piece of paper caught in the drawer. Her gaze flicked to it, and without thinking, she grabbed it. It was a note. The words on the note were simple: "Please don't do this. There's always another way." Maria froze. The gun dropped from her hand and she stared at the note, her heart aching. She didn't know who it was meant for, but the words hit her like a slap to the face. There was always another way. Her mind flashed back to her children. Mia, Ben, Lily. What was she doing? Was this really the answer? The more she thought about it, the more the weight of the decision pressed down on her. She had always promised herself that she would never let her children grow up in fear. But here she was, teaching them the wrong lesson. In a daze, she turned toward the door. It was too late to back out now. The sirens were too loud and there was no turning back. But as she made her way to the exit, something unexpected happened. "Ma'am?" The teller called out, his voice trembling. Maria turned, her heart pounding in her chest. The police were coming. But instead of reaching for his phone, the teller was holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Maria asked, her breath catching in her throat. "It's the emergency medical kit for the kids in the bank," the teller said, voice tight with fear. "We have a policy for emergencies. Just take it. I don't know if it's what you need, but you'll want it." Maria reached for the package, her hands shaking, not sure what to make of the strange moment. She stared at it in her hands, the weight of it oddly comforting, as if it were a lifeline she wasn't ready to grab hold of yet. But the sirens were louder now, and her desperation was mounting again. She had to move. The package was heavy, the brown paper rough in her hands, but somehow it felt like the right thing to do. She didn't know why, but her heart told her to take it. Without another word, she spun on her heels and ran out the door. The night air was cold as she stepped into the street, her heartbeat racing in her chest. The sounds of the sirens grew louder, and for the first time that night, she felt the full weight of the consequences. But then, before she could get far, something unexpected happened. A voice called out to her from the darkness. "Stop." Maria froze in her tracks. Her heart leaped into her throat. The voice was familiar. It was her boss, Mr. Williams. What was he doing here? Had he followed her? "Maria, what are you doing?" Mr. Williams stepped forward, his face pale. He looked at her with wide eyes, shocked by the sight of her holding the package and the gun. I don't know," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to save my daughter. Her voice cracked and she felt the floodgates open. The weight of everything that had led to this moment, losing her husband, fighting for her children's survival, poured out of her all at once. Mr. Williams looked at her, then at the package in her hands. You didn't have to do this, he said softly, his voice filled with regret. Maria, there are other ways. For a brief moment she saw something in his eyes, compassion, maybe even understanding. But then the sound of approaching police cars snapped her back to reality. Her world was closing in on her, the walls too tight, the choices too few. Maria took a deep breath, wiping her tears away as she made her decision. I had no choice, she whispered, then turned to face the bank again, the weight of the gun and the package in her hands pulling her forward. Just then, everything changed again. Maria was just about to step back into the bank when she saw something that stopped her dead in her tracks. A small, familiar figure stood at the corner of the street. It was Lily, her 6-year-old daughter, standing alone in the shadows, her eyes locked on her mother. Mom? Lily's voice was barely a whisper in the cold night air. Maria's heart stopped. What was Lily doing here? Maria froze when she saw Lily standing in the shadows, her little face pale against the dark street. Her heart pounded in her chest as her eyes locked onto her daughter's. The world around her seemed to stop. Her body, already trembling with the weight of her actions, went still. Lily took a step forward, her small figure framed by the dim streetlight, her bright green eyes wide with confusion and concern. Maria's mind raced. What was Lily doing here? How had she gotten out of the apartment? Mom? Lily whispered again, her voice barely audible, but somehow cutting through the night's chaos. Why are you holding that? Maria swallowed hard, her throat tight with guilt. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. She had been willing to sacrifice everything for her daughter's life, her dignity, her morals, her future. But now, standing here, looking at Lily's innocent face, Maria felt the full gravity of her choices. Her little girl didn't deserve any of this. Lily took another step forward, her small shoes making a soft tapping sound on the cold concrete. Why do you look so scared, Mommy? Where are we going? Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. She couldn't speak. The words, the explanations, they all seemed too much. She had spent years telling herself that everything she did was for her children, that she was doing the best she could to keep them safe and cared for. But now, standing here in the dark with Lily, she realized how much she had been fooling herself. Her little girl didn't need her to rob a bank. She needed her mother to protect her, to show her that even in the hardest of times, there was a better way. Maria's hand trembled as she lowered the gun, staring at it for a long moment before slowly placing it back in her coat pocket. She couldn't do this. She couldn't drag her daughter into a life of crime, no matter how desperate she was. Lily, what are you doing here? Maria finally managed to ask, her voice shaking. Lily looked up at her, a soft frown forming on her face. I came to help you, Mommy. Her voice was calm, but there was something in it that made Maria's heart break. Help me? Maria repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded, her small hand reaching out toward her mother. You're not alone, Mommy. I can make you feel better. I can make everything better. Maria's breath caught in her throat. What was Lily talking about? She had always known her daughter was special, but this was something different. For a moment, Maria almost believed her, believed that Lily's little hands could heal the broken pieces of her life. But the reality came crashing back. This wasn't magic. This was life. And sometimes life didn't give you second chances. Lily, you can't fix everything, Maria said softly, her voice breaking as she dropped to her knees in front of her daughter. She pulled her into her arms, holding her close. I've made so many mistakes. I'm scared, baby. I don't know how to make it right. Lily wrapped her tiny arms around Maria's neck, squeezing her tightly. It's okay, Mommy. We'll figure it out. We always do. Maria squeezed her daughter tighter, her heart aching. How could she have let things get this far? How could she have almost let Lily grow up thinking this was how things worked, that breaking the law was an answer to a problem? Maria's mind flickered back to the moment she had stood in the bank, ready to make the biggest mistake of her life. She had been so desperate, so overwhelmed with fear for her daughter, that she hadn't even thought about what Lily would see. She hadn't thought about what it would teach her. But now, with Lily in her arms, Maria saw something else, something she had been blind to before. It wasn't the bank money that would save her daughter. It wasn't the quick fix of a robbery or a lie. It was her love, her determination, and the strength to do what was right, even when everything seemed impossible. Mommy, don't be scared, Lily whispered, her voice soft but full of hope. You can fix everything. Maria pulled back slightly, looking into Lily's eyes. There was something in those bright green eyes that made her heart race. A kind of purity, a kind of faith that she had lost somewhere along the way. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tears fall freely. I can do this, she thought. I can be the mother she needs. I can fix this. Lily, I'm sorry, Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I've been so scared. But I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Lily smiled, her little face lighting up with the same warmth Maria had seen in her husband's smile so many years ago. Maria hugged her daughter again, holding her tightly as though the world might fall apart if she let go. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but this time, it wasn't the weight of desperation. It was the weight of love. The kind of love that had kept her going all these years, the kind of love that had given her the strength to survive. But just as Maria started to feel the warmth of hope settling in her chest, a flash of lights appeared at the end of the street. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing closer with every passing second. Mommy, Lily whispered, her voice trembling this time. We have to go. The police are coming. Maria's heart skipped a beat. The sirens were louder now, and in that moment she realized that the life she had known, the life she had fought so hard to hold together, was about to change forever. The police were here. And Maria had nowhere left to run. Before Maria could react, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind her. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered. Maria's blood ran cold as she recognized him. It was Officer David Miller, the same officer who had been at the scene when her husband had died in that crash all those years ago. Maria. His voice was low and steady, but there was a trace of something else beneath it. Sympathy? Judgment? Maria couldn't tell. Put your hands where I can see them. It's over. The sirens were deafening now, their wail piercing through the night air like a warning. Maria's heart raced as she looked down at Lily, her arms still wrapped tightly around her daughter. For a moment she thought she could feel the world crashing down on her, the weight of everything she had done, and everything she still had to do, sinking in. The lights of the police cars reflected off the wet pavement, growing brighter, drawing nearer with every passing second. Maria's legs felt like they might give way, her whole body trembling as fear and regret flooded her veins. What had she done? Was this really the end? Behind her she heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could feel his presence, like a shadow closing in. Maria. It was Officer David Miller. The same officer who had investigated the car accident all those years ago. The one who had stood at the scene watching her husband's lifeless body, his words offering no comfort. The one who had made sure she knew the drunk driver would never pay for what he had done. David's voice now was calm, almost too calm, as if he were trying to avoid setting her off. Put the package down, he said softly, and step away from the bank. It's over. Maria could feel the cold grip of fear tightening around her chest. It's over. She wanted to scream, to shout that it wasn't over, that she still had one last chance to save Lily, but the words stuck in her throat. For a brief moment, she wondered if she could run. Could she make it out of here, out of the tight grip of the police before everything came crashing down? But then she looked down at Lily, who was still holding on to her with that same hopeful look in her eyes. She was the only thing that mattered now. No, this is it. There's no turning back. Her fingers curled tighter around the package, the last bit of hope she had clung to. It wasn't money. It wasn't a way out of this. But it was something. Something that she could still hold on to. A thread of hope, a lifeline. Maria, you've got to come with me, David said, his voice firm but not unkind. We're not going to hurt you. Just let it go. We'll figure this out. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She had to think. She had to find a way to get out of this. I just need, she took a deep breath, swallowing the lump in her throat. I just need to save my daughter. David's gaze softened, but only for a second. I know, Maria. I know. But this isn't the way. A sudden sharp noise sliced through the silence, the sound of a door creaking open. Maria snapped her head up, her breath catching in her chest. A figure stepped into view from the shadows. The police lights illuminated their face just enough for Maria to see who it was. It was her boss, Mr. Williams. What the hell are you doing here? Maria spat, her voice shaky with disbelief. What was he doing here, standing in the middle of the street, so calm, so composed? David looked at him in surprise. Do you know her, sir? Know her? Mr. Williams repeated, his eyes flicking to Maria with an unreadable expression. Yes, I know her. She's a good woman, and this is all just a misunderstanding. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Misunderstanding? Was he really standing here trying to play this off as some kind of accident? He had known about everything, the bank, the robbery, the desperation. He knew what she had been trying to do. But now, as he stood there, acting like everything was just a mistake, Maria felt the first flicker of anger ignite inside her. She had trusted him. She had worked for him, bent over backward to make ends meet, and this was how he repaid her? No, it's not a misunderstanding, Maria said, her voice rising with each word. I tried to get help from you. I begged you for money when Lily was sick and you turned me away. You did nothing. You stood there and watched as my daughter fought for her life. You couldn't even spare $1. And now you're here, pretending like this is all just a mistake. David watched the exchange between them, his eyes narrowing. What's going on here, Mr. Williams? He asked, his voice cool, but Maria could hear the suspicion in it. Mr. Williams shifted on his feet, his expression faltering for the briefest moment before he regained his composure. I don't know what she's talking about, he muttered, glancing nervously at the package in Maria's hands. But I'm willing to help. I'll make this go away. Help. Maria's mind reeled at the words. After everything he had done, or rather hadn't done, he still thought he could help? He couldn't fix this. No one could. Not anymore. No one can fix this, Maria said quietly, her voice full of despair. She could feel her world crumbling, piece by piece. She had been willing to give up everything for Lily. But now, standing here with her boss pretending to care, with the police closing in, she realized she had nothing left to give. I've already made my choice, Maria whispered, looking down at Lily's small hand still clutching hers. I've done what I had to do. David took a step forward, his voice stern. Maria, listen to me. You don't have to do this. Please, let's just talk about this. Maria shook her head, her thoughts a tangled mess of guilt, anger, and fear. She wanted to listen. She wanted to believe that there was still a way out, that they could fix everything. But the truth was staring her in the face. The sirens, the flashing lights, the confused expressions from everyone standing around her, it was all too much. And just then another voice broke through the chaos. Mom? Maria's blood ran cold at the sound of the voice. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Mia. Her daughter. What are you doing here? Maria whispered, panic rising in her chest. She hadn't seen Mia since she left for her second job this morning. How could she have ended up here? What was she doing in the middle of all this? Mia stepped forward, her face pale with fear but resolute. Mom, I came to help. I know you're trying to protect us, but you can't do this. Please just let it go. It's not worth it. Maria stared at her daughter, the last person she wanted to involve in this nightmare. Mia was still young, just 17, and already burdened with more than she should ever have to bear. Maria wanted to protect her. But now, looking at her, Maria realized something else. She wasn't just trying to protect her children from the world. She was trying to protect them from herself. I'm so sorry, Maria whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted you to see this. Mia shook her head. Mom, it's not too late. We'll figure this out. Together. You don't have to do this alone. Maria looked down at the package in her hands again. The weight of it seemed heavier now. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about saving Lily. It was about something deeper, something she hadn't realized until now. She had spent so long trying to hold everything together. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go. Before Maria could make a decision, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. The police had arrived. They were close now. And this time there would be no turning back. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she heard the sharp voice of the lead officer. Maria, he said, his voice cold. Step away from the package. We're taking you in. The air around Maria seemed to thicken with tension as the officer's words rang in her ears. We're taking you in. Maria's breath hitched in her chest. The flashing lights of the police cars were so bright now, she could feel them burning into her skin. Her heart hammered in her chest as she looked from David to her daughter, Mia, to the officers who were slowly advancing toward her. The walls were closing in. Lily still clung to her side, unaware of the chaos unfolding around them, trusting her mother with that simple, unspoken faith only a child could have. Maria's stomach twisted painfully as she looked at her little girl, realizing that no matter what happened, her life was never going to be the same again. I've lost control, Maria thought. I've lost everything. David stepped forward, his face now clouded with something close to regret. Maria, he said quietly, it doesn't have to be like this. You can still turn yourself in and we'll go from there. There's a chance you can make this right. Maria's mind spun in circles, torn between the reality of the situation and the faint hope that David might still be offering her an out. But then she looked at Mia, her strong, resilient daughter, and the flood of guilt that hit her was almost unbearable. For years, Maria had tried to protect her children from the pain of their father's death, from the injustice of the system, from the heartache of watching them grow up in a world where she couldn't give them the life they deserved. And now, all her efforts had led them here, standing in the middle of a street with a choice to make. "Mom?" Mia's voice was strained, like she was holding back tears. "You don't have to keep running. We'll figure it out. Just don't make things worse for all of us." Maria's fingers tightened around the package, the weight of it feeling heavier by the second. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about saving Lily. It was about something deeper. This was her chance to make a difference, to prove that she could still protect her children, to show them that she had the strength to fight for a better future, even if it meant taking the hardest step of her life. She glanced down at Lily, still holding onto her, eyes full of trust, and for a split second, Maria almost let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to get out of this. But then a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "Maria." It was Mr. Williams. He had moved closer to the group, standing just a few feet away. He looked oddly composed now, his earlier panic replaced by a calm resolve. His gaze flicked to Lily, then to the police officers before meeting Maria's eyes. "You don't have to do this," he said. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "I've seen what you've been going through. But robbing a bank, this isn't the way." Maria's stomach churned. "You don't get it. You don't understand. My daughter is dying and no one's been able to help. The system failed me. The system failed us," she spat, her voice shaking with frustration and rage. "I had no other choice." "I understand more than you think," Mr. Williams said, his voice still low, but there was an edge to it now, something Maria hadn't expected. "But there's always another way, Maria. You're not thinking clearly. We can fix this. I can help you." Maria stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. Help her? After everything? After he had refused her when she begged for money to buy Lily's medicine? How could he possibly think she would trust him now? "I don't need your help," Maria snapped, stepping back, her chest tight with anger. "You've had your chance. I'm done relying on people who let me down." The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment, it seemed like the whole world had stopped moving. The police officers were waiting, watching her, waiting for her to make a decision. David's eyes were filled with a kind of quiet resignation. "Maria, please," David said, his voice softer now. "It doesn't have to end like this." Maria could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. The urge to run, to just disappear, was stronger than ever. But she knew she couldn't. Not anymore. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a choice. No more running. Slowly, she released her grip on the package and let it fall to the ground. The sound of it hitting the pavement echoed in the silence. But just as she thought the moment was over, just as she believed she had surrendered, something inside her snapped. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm not going to let it end like this." Before anyone could react, Maria turned on her heels and ran. "Mom?" Lily's voice rang out, but Maria couldn't stop. She couldn't think. She just needed to get away. The sound of footsteps behind her was deafening, but she didn't look back. She pushed herself harder, running faster, trying to outrun everything. The fear, the guilt, the shame. She could hear the officers shouting after her, but she couldn't stop now. She had to protect her children. She had to save them. "If I can just get away, maybe there's still time. Maybe there's a way out." But no matter how fast she ran, the sirens followed her, growing louder and louder with every step. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in her side. Maria stumbled, gasping for air. She looked down to see blood staining her shirt. Her hand instinctively pressed against the wound. What happened? Before she could react, a strong hand grabbed her shoulder and yanked her back. "Maria, stop. It's over." David's voice was the last thing she heard before everything went black. The world felt like it was spinning. Maria's head throbbed with pain, the cold, damp pavement biting into her skin as she lay on the ground. Her chest was tight, every breath coming in shallow gasps. The cold metal of handcuffs clinked against her wrists as the police officers surrounded her, their faces grim. Her vision blurred as she tried to focus on what was happening around her. The night sky above her seemed so distant now, the flashing lights of the police cars casting eerie shadows over the scene. Her body felt heavy, like she was sinking into the ground, but her mind raced, everything moving too fast, too out of control. "Maria," David's voice broke through the fog in her head. "Maria, stay with me." She blinked, trying to clear the haze. David was kneeling beside her now, his face inches from hers, his eyes filled with concern. But it wasn't just concern. There was something else, something like guilt, like regret. Her head swam and she couldn't form a coherent thought. What happened? Why does it hurt so much? The pressure in her chest increased as her breathing grew more ragged. The pain from the wound in her side was sharp, burning through her entire body. The blood was staining her clothes, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered right now. "David," Maria whispered weakly, her voice hoarse. "What happened to me? Maria, just stay with me, okay?" David's voice was urgent now, but there was a tremor in it. "You need to stay conscious. We're going to get you help." Maria tried to speak, to protest, but the words didn't come. All she could do was focus on the pain in her side, the coldness creeping through her limbs. She felt herself slipping away from the world, her body too tired to fight. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Mia's voice calling her name, frantic and terrified. "Mom? Mom, please." But it was too much. Her head lulled to the side, and the darkness threatened to pull her under. Just as Maria's vision began to fade completely, she felt a sharp tug. Someone was lifting her, pulling her away from the ground. She tried to fight it, but the darkness was too strong. Her eyes fluttered closed and everything went black. Maria woke up to the beeping of machines and the sterile smell of a hospital room. Her head felt foggy, her body weak and sore. She blinked, slowly trying to adjust to the light, the soft hum of the hospital equipment around her filling her ears. Where was she? What happened? Her hands moved instinctively to her side, but they were covered in bandages. The pain was still there, but dull now, like a distant ache. She could feel the heavy weight of exhaustion hanging over her, pulling her down. "Mom?" Mia's voice broke through the haze, and Maria turned her head slowly to see her daughter standing at the foot of the bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Mom, you're awake. Thank God." Maria's heart sank. She could barely remember what had happened, but Mia's presence brought everything rushing back in painful waves. "Mom, you were shot." Mia's voice quivered, her eyes wide with fear. "They say it was a mistake. The officer didn't mean to hurt you." Maria tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. She swallowed hard, her mind racing with questions. How had she ended up here? Was Lily okay? What was going to happen next? Mia seemed to read her thoughts. "Lily's fine, Mom. She's safe. You don't have to worry about her." Maria nodded weakly, trying to take comfort in the fact that her daughter was safe, that Lily was out of harm's way. But she still couldn't shake the feeling that everything had gone terribly wrong. "We have to get you out of here," Mia continued, her voice growing desperate. "They're saying you'll be charged for the robbery. Mom, you could go to prison." Maria closed her eyes, trying to absorb her daughter's words. It didn't make sense. It didn't seem real. She had done it to protect Lily. She had risked everything, her freedom, her integrity, for the chance to save her daughter. And now she was facing the consequences. But she couldn't let it end like this. She couldn't leave her children without a mother. "Don't worry, Mia," Maria said softly, her voice hoarse. "We'll get through this." Mia wiped her eyes, but the fear didn't leave her expression. "Mom, I'm scared. What if they don't believe you? What if they lock you up forever?" Maria reached out weakly and took her daughter's hand. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." But deep down, Maria wasn't so sure. The walls were closing in on her. She had always fought for her family, for the life she wanted to give her children. But now she wasn't sure if it was enough. As Maria tried to sit up, she heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway. A sharp knock echoed from the door before it creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. Maria's stomach twisted as she recognized the face. It was Mr. Williams. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But it's time we talk about what's next." Maria's pulse quickened. The man who had watched her suffer, who had refused to help her when she needed it most, was now standing here in her hospital room, acting like he could solve everything. How dare he? What do you want? Maria's voice was barely above a whisper, but her anger was clear. "I can help you," Mr. Williams said, stepping closer to the bed. His gaze flickered toward Mia, who was standing by the door, her arms crossed, glaring at him. "But you're going to have to trust me." Maria felt her blood run cold. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep my family together," she said, her words sharp, desperate. "But I'm not doing it your way." Mr. Williams hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It's not your choice, Maria. It's not your choice anymore." Maria's heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a piece of paper and slid it onto her bedside table. "Read this." You'll need to make a decision. And you'll need to make it soon. She stared at the paper, her hands trembling as she reached for it. But before she could unfold it, the sound of footsteps interrupted them again. The door slammed open, and this time, it wasn't just David or Mr. Williams. It was a lawyer. Maria felt as though the walls of the courtroom were closing in on her. The air was thick with tension, every eye on her as she stood before the judge, the weight of her choices pressing down on her shoulders. It had been a long road from the streets of the city to this courtroom. Maria had walked into this moment feeling like the world was against her, yet here she was, standing tall, with Lily by her side, still holding on to that little glimmer of hope. Her life had been defined by sacrifice and survival, but now, for the first time, Maria was fighting not just for her freedom, but for something bigger, her future, her children's future. And in that fight, she was up against one of the most powerful people she had ever met, Judge Harper. Maria's thoughts raced as she looked at the judge, her eyes cold, her wheelchair a silent reminder of the tragedy that had befallen her. Maria knew her story. It wasn't just about a woman struggling to make ends meet or a mother fighting for her sick child. It was about someone who had seen pain, witnessed injustice, and now found herself faced with the ultimate test of faith. Her own journey mirrored that of Judge Harper, albeit in different ways. Harper had once been strong and unyielding, but now she was broken, confined to a wheelchair, her dreams shattered. Maria had once been hopeless too, but now, standing here, facing the judge, she knew something powerful had been unlocked within her. "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Maria's voice cracked as she spoke, feeling the weight of her words. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to save my daughter. But I made a mistake. I don't want to hurt anyone." Judge Harper's gaze remained steady as she looked at Maria, her expression unreadable. "You've made a series of choices, Maria. And now, we all must face the consequences of those choices." Maria's heart sank, but she couldn't back down now. Not when Lily was watching. Not when her family's future depended on what happened next. "I've already lost everything," Maria said, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her. "But I'm asking for a chance. A chance to prove that I can make things right." The room fell silent as Judge Harper's eyes locked onto Maria's, searching, almost as if she were looking for something. A sign of guilt? Of remorse? Or perhaps something deeper? Something that Maria didn't even understand yet. "I've been where you are," Judge Harper finally spoke, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "But you have to understand that the law is the law, Maria. I cannot simply overlook your crime, no matter the circumstances." "But my daughter," Maria began, her voice rising, desperate. "She's sick, Your Honor. I did it for her. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let her suffer." Judge Harper paused, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair. The entire courtroom watched, waiting for the judge's response. The weight of the silence was suffocating. "You don't have to do this," a voice suddenly cut through the quiet. It was Mr. Williams, standing at the side of the room, his face tense with worry. "I can help you, Maria. You don't have to face this alone." Maria looked at him, the man who had turned his back on her when she had asked for help. She couldn't trust him now. Not after everything. "Please, Maria," Mr. Williams continued, his voice pleading. "Let me make this right. I can work with the court. I can help you. I'll do whatever it takes to." "No," Maria interrupted, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I don't need your help anymore. I don't need anyone who's willing to turn away when things get hard." The courtroom gasped, but Maria didn't care. She was done with playing by the rules of people who didn't understand her pain. She had made a choice, and now she was going to see it through no matter the cost. Judge Harper's gaze softened, a flicker of something resembling understanding crossing her features. "Maria," she said quietly, "I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like there's no way out. But this isn't the way. You cannot simply expect the world to fix itself for you." Maria swallowed hard. "I didn't ask for the world to fix itself," she said, her voice breaking. "I just asked for a chance to fix things for my daughter." The room fell into another heavy silence as Judge Harper sat back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly against the armrests. "I understand your pain, Maria, but that doesn't change the law." Maria nodded slowly, knowing she wasn't going to win this fight. She had done everything she could, but the weight of the law was too much to overcome. She had been caught in a system that didn't care about her or her struggles. And now the consequences were closing in on her. As the tension in the room mounted, Maria felt the crushing reality settle in. She had lost. The judge was going to rule against her. She had no way out. But then, just as Maria's head dropped in defeat, something unexpected happened. Lily, her 6-year-old daughter, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and walked to the front of the room, her tiny feet patting softly against the floor. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as Lily approached the judge's bench, her small figure framed by the light. "Judge Harper," Lily's voice rang out, clear and unafraid. "I can help you. I can make you walk again. I promised my mom." The room went dead silent. All eyes turned to Judge Harper, who looked at Lily with wide eyes. And for the first time, Maria felt a glimmer of hope. The courtroom was still, every person in the room frozen by the words that had just come from Lily's mouth. Maria's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be possible? Lily, her tiny hands clasped together, stood confidently in front of Judge Harper. The room had fallen into a stunned silence, every person waiting for the judge's reaction. But Judge Harper said nothing at first. She just stared at the little girl as though processing what had been said. Maria's mind raced. How can Lily think she can heal the judge? How could she promise something so impossible? And yet, something about the way Lily stood there, so certain, so calm, touched a part of Maria's heart that had been hardened by the world's injustices. Lily's green eyes never left Judge Harper's. "I can help you," Lily repeated, her voice soft but filled with a quiet determination. "I promised my mom I would." Judge Harper's gaze shifted from Lily to Maria, and for a long moment, neither woman spoke. The silence was deafening, and Maria felt her pulse quicken as the weight of the moment settled on her. Finally, Judge Harper spoke, her voice tight with emotion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. "How could a child like you heal someone like me?" Lily's face lit up with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. "Because when people feel sad for too long, they forget how to walk. They forget how to move. But I can help you remember. If you let my mom go, I'll help you." Maria's chest tightened as she looked at Lily. Could it be true? Could her little girl really have the power to heal the judge, to make her walk again? Judge Harper looked at Lily, her expression unreadable. "And what makes you think you can do this, child?" Lily took a step closer, her small hand reaching out to gently touch Judge Harper's arm. "I can see the sadness inside you," she said softly. "I can feel it. And I know that if you just remember how to be happy again, your legs will remember how to move." The entire courtroom was still as Lily stood there, her hand resting lightly on the judge's arm. No one knew what to say. The atmosphere was thick with disbelief, but there was also something else, a spark of hope that flickered in the air. Judge Harper's eyes softened as she looked down at Lily. The pain in her heart, the years of sorrow and loss, all seemed to rise to the surface. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Slowly, carefully, Judge Harper lifted her hand from the armrest and placed it gently over Lily's small hand. A tear slid down her cheek, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. "I'm willing to give you a chance, Lily," Judge Harper said, her voice shaky with emotion. "I'm willing to believe in you." The courtroom gasped in unison, a murmur of disbelief sweeping through the room. But Maria only had eyes for her daughter, standing there with that quiet, unshakable faith. And then, something incredible happened. Slowly, painfully, Judge Harper shifted in her chair, the muscles in her legs twitching as if responding to Lily's touch. For the first time in years, her legs began to move. The courtroom fell silent as everyone watched, stunned, as Judge Harper slowly lifted one foot off the ground. Judge Harper's face twisted in pain, but there was something else there too, something powerful, something incredible. She was standing. Maria couldn't believe her eyes. The impossible was happening. And in that moment, everything changed.